Good morning, mushrooms, ladies and gentlemen, boys and girls, brothers, sisters, mothers, misters, and all my cousins out there around the world. It's time to plug in and get this train a chugging. Surprise! COVID is spiraling out of control in some US states. We've had it once before, and spirals turn up from time to time. More often, we're talking about the downward spiral, and this seems like it's a downward spiral as well, where things getting worse and worse. And as the circles of the spiral become more and more concentric, tighter and tighter, the speed increases. Just like if you're spinning, whipping something around like that, it's getting out of control, and eventually it might slip out of your hand and go flying off into Never Never Land. And so things are spiraling out of control. We might not be able to get a grip on the virus and bring it back under control. To rein it in, to use and recycle some more vocabulary from past episodes. Moving on, here in the caption, California, Texas, and Florida, surprise, have all set new records for new cases in one day. They're setting new records. That means they have broken the previous records. And, well, yeah, these states are known for being record setters in various capacities. Florida, man. Texas. And, well, California, just such a diverse mixing pot, melting pot of all sorts of things. Well, they set records too. Moving on. In the news, all over the news, John Bolton's book, which Trump has been trying to block, trying to suppress, past vocabulary. He claims that Trump turned a blind eye to the pandemic. Just a great, great phrase. We've had it on the show before, and it comes from his concrete historical situation in which Lord Admiral Horatio Nelson, when told to retreat, turned his actual blind eye to the telescope and said, "I don't see the retreat flag," continued the attack, ended up winning the battle, and then becoming Commander-in-Chief of the British Navy. To turn a blind eye to something actually just means to look at it but pretend not to see it. And so, yeah, he was like, pandemic? Schmandemic. What demic? Moving on. All right, whoa. The new normal. Yes, we've got fever checks, logical, and empty plinths. Not a common word. Dear God, what is a plinth? This might be the only time you ever see this word. However, as a result, because it's weird and wild and wacky and something new, had to put it up there. A plinth is a column of stone upon which a statue normally rests, and therefore the plinth is empty. All right, that was way too many words for something that you will never see again. Let's move on. Angry residents erupts at a new meeting over the mask rule. Watch some of the video here. People are freaking out. You can't make me wear a mask. That's the government treading on my rights. Freedom! Just typically angry white trash, but well, sorry, don't mean to offend anyone out there, but I don't think you are my average typical viewer. So I think we're in the clear here. Award-winning famous Australian airline is to cut 6,000 jobs. To cut them, they're going to be laying off people, they're going to be furloughing people, they are going to be firing people. Remember though, or maybe they might even just force them to resign, because then they don't have to pay the unemployment benefits because the person willfully chose to leave their job. Willfully. But remember, furlough is when you are out of work, but you are still retaining the benefits from the company. It's like you're on hiatus, you're on a little pause, and when economic situation recovers, then you will get your job back. Layoffs are similar, however, you receive no benefits and no pay. It's like you're being fired, but not for underperforming or doing something wrong. It's just because the economic situation cannot support your continued employment, and so therefore they've had to just let you go. Here's a good word. Republicans are aghast as Trump's divisive strategy sinks the poll numbers. Well, the poll numbers, the survey of people around the United States about whether they see him as good or bad, will they vote for him again in November? His numbers in the poll are sinking because he's using a strategy that is divisive and is dividing America further, but not even just the United States. He's dividing members of his own party. People who were kind of sort of in his camp on his side of the line, well, he's actually splitting them off and they're starting to lean in the other direction and might end up voting for the Democratic Party in the election. So his divisive strategy is sinking his poll numbers, lessening his chance of re-election, and members of his party, his fellow Republicans, are aghast. They are shocked and worried and dismayed, jaw-dropping. I can't believe this. Very, very worried, shocked, dismayed, maybe even a little bit afraid. And they should be afraid because things are not looking very good for them in November. Moving on to China. China's rival to GPS is finally finished. It's over, it's done, it's dead, apparently. Remember, a rival is a competitor, someone who you compete against. It's not necessarily an enemy. Often we have friendly rivalries. The quality or state of being a rival is a rivalry. And so we have friendly rivals, we have bitter rivals, and often with our rivals we have a begrudging sort of respect for them because they are a worthy competitor. It's over, it's finished, it's dead, it's done, and so let's just bury it, put the nail in the coffin, and move on to tennis news. Djokovic's folly is a lesson to the world. A folly is a foolish or stupid action, basically. And as you know, maybe from yesterday or news in general, he got a whole bunch of tennis people together for some event, and now a whole bunch of them have coronavirus. And so that was a pretty stupid action. Doesn't. Just a simple word. Because US is not metric, because English is not really metric, we've got this weird term of a dozen, which just means 12. 12 units of something. We sell eggs in dozens, groups of 12. Sometimes you might hear the term a baker's dozen, and it's interesting because that's actually 13, and it's because when a baker would bake something, he would bake one extra just to taste it himself, and so a baker's dozen is actually 13, not 12, and it implies one extra for yourself. Moving on. Talking about suits? No, it's a lawsuit. Obviously, you silly. Wrongful death, something that caused an accidental death of this actress, and so they have filed a lawsuit against whoever caused that because it shouldn't have happened. And so it's a wrongful death, I would hyphenate that, lawsuit filed over the death of blah blah blah. And as always, remember, we use the verb to file charges, file lawsuits, file complaints, file for divorce, file for bankruptcy. Because, well, any sort of official legal things require lawyers, and lawyers require papers and signatures, and so those papers then have to go into files. And so we just cut to the chase and use the word file to describe the action. But to mock somebody means to make fun of them, to tease them, to belittle them, to, make fun of them. But with mocking especially, it's usually implies through imitation. Much like we have the mockingbird, you might know the book To Kill a Mockingbird, really has nothing to do with anything, but the mockingbird in real life is a bird which imitates the calls of other birds. Hence the name, because it imitates the calls of them. And I don't think it's making fun of them. Who knows? It's a bird. Moving on. Here's a word that you might see now and again. To be indicted. 3 men have been indicted, reduced present perfect passive, in the death of Ahmad Albury. Indicted is basically the same thing as having charges filed against you. However, there's a nuanced difference. Not that important unless you're into legal English, but it's so you know, people have been officially charged with the crime. The difference being, when you're charged with a crime, the charges are filed by a prosecutor who is a representative of the government, whereas an indictment, the charges are filed by a grand jury. Now, a grand jury is a group of people that they get together and they present them the evidence, and then those people decide whether or not the crime or the supposed crime is worthy of going to court. And so it's like a jury before the trial to see if it's worth the time and effort to actually even go to trial. Pet poultry. Poultry are birds. is specifically birds that we eat. And so pet poultry, pet chickens, pet geese, ducks, pet peacocks, other birds cause 465 people to fall ill, fall sick, to get ill and catch, guess what? COVID. No, actually, I don't know if it was COVID, but birds and, well, you probably remember the avian flu, aviary, related to birds. Birds are disease vectors, and those viruses and illnesses have become potentially transmissible to humans. Yay! Don't keep animals in your house. Don't live in proximity to pigs and chickens and bats and other such animals. It's closing in on the US. It's getting closer and closer and closer. To close in on something means to approach it. We're closing in on our goals, closing in on our prey. Closing in on just means getting closer and closer and closer. Often in a threatening or menacing sort of way. But also the idea of plume, as I said yesterday, it's a big fluffy feather. Often people would put them as a decoration in their hat, or some birds have them on the top of their head in order to attract mates. And I was thinking, I forgot about it, there's the term nom de plume, and obviously French from my terrible accent. A nom de plume is a pseudonym or a fake name under which people write. And why nom de plume? Because people used to write with quills, which were big feathers, yeah? Ta-da! For example, like George Sand, the famous author, was not a George. It was a woman, in fact. However, she published all of her works under the name George Sand because, and she's by far not the only example, but people didn't publish women's works because they didn't believe they could be authors. And so they often used a pseudonym or a nom de plume. Similarly, we also have nom de guerre, like the Black Knight. Who knows if he was real, from King Arthur, or Monty Python, that is. Or the Red Baron in World War I, the famous German fighter pilot. A name under which you do battle, do war. Sorry, you can probably hear the dog barking, talking to the neighbor's dog. Not much I can do about that right now. Moving on. Race car driver posthumously has been posthumously named as the fastest woman on Earth. So we've got a reduced present perfect passive, has been named the fastest woman on Earth posthumously. Post, prefix meaning after, and this means after death. All right, sorry, pardon me, letting the puppy in. Cool special effects, huh? You see posthumously also used for authors. A lot of people like Franz Kafka, the vast majority, if not all of his works were published posthumously. Most artists and most authors, it seems, actually finally achieve fame and recognition posthumously. Killers! A convicted killer lashes out at a witness. And so this person, charges were filed, they were found guilty, they were sentenced to prison. Because once you are found guilty, then you are convicted of the crime, and the person then is not just a suspect, they are a convict. And to lash out though, to like quickly hit or kick at someone, or to lash is the verb that we use for whips, like that. And so to lash out at somebody is, and we're talking here verbally, not physically, obviously, to very angrily criticize and condemn somebody. I don't know the context, haven't read the story. If you do, let me know. I'd love to know. It's so hot at the Grand Canyon that your shoes could melt. Melt. Just like the glaciers are melting, the polar ice caps are melting, changing from a solid to a liquid. Yeah, different than from a solid to a gas, that's sublimation. Or then if you take a steak out of your freezer and let it sit on the kitchen countertop or on the table, a steak doesn't melt. A steak thaws. It's when a solid becomes unfrozen. Whew, that's hot. If your shoes are melting, you probably shouldn't be there. Actually, I'm not even going to get into this. It's too much to unpack in this headline. But the American dream, it's suffering at the moment. This photographer is remembered for his harrowing images of the Cultural Revolution. Harrowing. Talk about harrowing experiences like in war, or the car crash, or some horrible event it was terrifying. It really was upsetting. It caused you emotional distress, maybe because of the possibility of physical harm. And so, yes, the Cultural Revolution, millions and millions of people died. And so I think that, yeah, these images would be disturbing, distressing, upsetting in any number of ways. More warm and fuzzy news, though. Get better sleep by cuddling up with or cuddling up to your partner. They want you to snuggle, embrace and hug each other, have skin contact. Apparently, it will give you better sleep. Fragile. Easily breakable, or in that case then transferring it to weak. Fragility is the state of being fragile. Scandalous! Scandalous abuse. If you are involved in a scandal, that means you have done something wrong. But if you do something wrong, you commit a crime, you steal some money, or something along those lines, it doesn't become a scandal until it becomes public knowledge, until it comes into the public light, and then people are angry, there is backlash, there is outrage, people are upset, and then it becomes a scandal. And scandalous is a nice adjective meaning, well, involving a scandal. Ta-da! Moving on. So, a European ban on US travelers would send a humbling message. Now, to be humble is to feel that you are less important or not as important as other people. And so the fact of being humble, or humility, is even stronger than modesty. If you're modest, you take somebody compliments you and you're like, oh, well, I couldn't have done it by myself. I mean, all the credit goes to my team, right? And so you're not bragging or boasting. You're not arrogant. You're not tooting your own horn, taking the credit and distributing it to other relevant parties, maybe sharing in it. Too humble as a verb, maybe the person is being a little bit arrogant, walking tall, I'm the best, and then something happens and it causes them to bring their self-worth and self-opinion down a bit, probably to a more accurate position. And so too humble is to make somebody feel more humble, therefore coming from, less arrogant or less full of themselves as they had previously been. To kid someone. I'm just kidding. It means basically joking, but especially by saying things that are not true and allowing the other person to believe things that are not true. Like when my grandfather told me that the word gullible is not in the dictionary, and I believed him. And he said, you believed me, you're gullible. I was just kidding. Tell somebody something that is not true and allow them to believe that as a joke. It's not supposed to be done with malicious intent. You're not trying to cause them harm or something along those lines. It's just as a simple joke. And another phrase with that commonly is, dude, you're just kidding yourself. You're not that good. You're not that important. It means that if you're kidding yourself, it means that you're lying to yourself. And so stop kidding yourself. Right on. Now we're just whipping a dead horse. Those were the news. Those were the headlines for today. Thanks everybody for tuning in. Elif, nice to see you. Anybody else watching out there anonymously in Twitchlandia, thanks for tuning in. As you know, every day I keep trying to recycle that vocabulary so you can keep ramping up your ability to articulate and explain and express yourself in an accurate and colorful fashion. Thanks to everybody for the likes, subscribes, follows, passing us along to friends. I'm going to be posting some more stuff on Facebook different than this. I'm going to start diversifying and expanding the horizons outside of just merely this little newsroom. Thanks everybody again. Thank you, thank you, thank you. I can't say it enough. Much love. Seeing you in the comments is what keeps stoking the fires and the passion for this project. Much love, and if I don't see you sooner, I'll see you at 8 a.m. tomorrow. Bye-bye. Stop the stream. Where is it? There it is. Okay. Now, as I said before, bye-bye.